Okay, we are now recording. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the show, Trauma to Love, with Dr. Stephen Diggs is our guest today. And Reverend Leslie and myself are, of course, here doing what we normally do, is figuring out what we're supposed to be doing. So anyway, I want to welcome you, Steve, to the show. I'm so glad you agreed to come on and see us.
Yeah, glad to be here. You're very dear to me, Dale, so I'm glad to be here.
We
They
know
all
each
speak so highly of you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
highly.
We've traveled some miles, Dale and
yes, we have.
How long have you been? So why don't you tell us what kind of practice do you do?
I. Yeah, my practice is focused on healing personality disorder,
Okay.
and so um, we have a method that I've primarily developed with the help of other people, but I've primarily developed a method designed to treat and heal personality disorder. And it is an integrative model, which means that it uses techniques, principles, theories from lots of different therapy methods and then weaves them all together into a singular whole.
Wow. Very cool. Great.
Which I can
What's the
testify.
most amount of personalities you've dealt with at one time? Do you deal with multiple personalities or just one?
Yeah, we deal with multiple personalities, but multiple personalities are a particular variant of ordinary personality disorder. So they have to be approached differently. But we have a therapist, Tishan Horn, who is absolutely brilliant at DID, and she is stunning to watch. People
From
come in and
your
get better.
experience with your
What?
with your experience in your clientele, what's the average age of onset for diagnosis? Not as symptoms, but a diagnosis.
Well, that's a great question, Leslie, and I'm going to get a little clinical here. So tell me if it's too clinical, okay?
But Dale, you
For
be the judge because I'm a mental health nurse, so I'm
right.
cool.
So it wouldn't be too
I'm
clinical
good
for
with
you. I mean, for the audience, so for
Yeah.
people who might be listening, um, there is the diagnosis of personality disorder, and it's specific to borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. Those are specific diagnoses and specific disorders, and they are appear in the DSM. And in the DSM, if you meet 5 of 9 criteria for borderline personality disorder, then you are given the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder.
Steve, define
Yes?
the DSM. Tell us what the DSM is.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatry and Psychology and Therapy. It's the place where all of our diagnoses reside.
It's how
So,
they get paid. Like in
what?
healthcare and mental health, without a DSM, without diagnostic code, you can't bill, correct? Am I
Yeah, you cannot bill without that.
Yeah.
And so you need that. And if you've got anything from ADHD to heroin addiction to dementia to personality disorder to anxiety to depression, it's in that book. And we pull that out as a reference so we can make sure and get the right diagnosis or pattern of diagnoses. And that's what the book is for. So yeah, good question, Dale. Leslie and I, it's just like we live with it all day long. So it's like saying, oh yeah, your coffee cup. For us, it's like, oh yeah, that thing is always there, right?
Steve, back when I left work in 2017, like my area expertise became like the adverse childhood experience study and the neuroscience chronic stress. And so I actually, when I was trying to tell organizations about this back in 2017, I did what I always do. I went, oh, I need to experience this. So I threw myself into a state of chronic toxic stress for the last couple of years. But my question for you, back then they were saying the issue was that ACEs in itself, like if you had an IACES score, that was not in the DSM. So they had to kind of fit people into categories to bill. Is that still the case, or in the last 7 years with the push for trauma informed, have they made ACEs or chronic toxic stress a DSM that everything umbrella is under?
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. It might happen, and there are some people who are attempting an alternative to criteria-based diagnosis, this criteria, to one in which it's based on traits, personality traits, negative affect, disinhibition, that kind of thing. So people are looking to adjust the way the DSM
Mhm.
is, change the way the DSM is used. I personally don't want to do that. I think the DSM criteria are very valuable. They're just limited. I always think keep what's good about an existing theory or principle and add to it. Don't replace it, right? Find out what's good. So if we're looking at long-term psychoanalytic therapy, I'm going to look at what's good about that, and then I'm going to look at what's good about solution-focused therapy, and then I'm going to look at what's good about psychodrama, and I'm going to put them together. Likewise, the ACEs perspective is really essential. I believe in it so much, but we don't need to replace the existing criteria. We need to add to it and make a more complicated and rich view of how personality disorder develops out of adverse childhood experience.
And Dale, I'll ask one question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this. You can take it over. But from my 30 years of working with women in trauma, and for what made it possible for them to like fall in love with themselves and start self-trust and move beyond the story, I came up with this statement, and tell me your opinion on this, although what you just said,
Yeah.
I know it. But my belief is that like when we put the labels on people, narcissistic, personality, whatever, at the root, they're all just coping mechanisms we developed in childhood to help us feel safe
Yes.
that don't serve us well in adulthood. Is that an
Yes.
accurate statement?
That's exactly what we say 100 times a day in the therapy room. That is, you developed a coping strategy in childhood that doesn't work in adulthood. We say that.
So is there a
hundreds of times.
way we can take away the blame and shame of the labels? I mean, because when I used to do talks for AA and CODA, I'm like, listen, I'm going to tell you, I don't think they're character flaws. They're just ways we developed as little kids. That
Well,
whether we had trauma or whether it was just teasing on the schoolyard, you know what I mean? Like it was a way to keep safe, and you know, most of it was hiding ourselves, which led to a whole other slew of things.
well, that's a question. I do see it quite differently, Leslie, in that I don't think it is blaming or shaming to diagnose somebody. Now, my long story is I suffered most of my life with a very severe personality disorder.
Mhm.
And I did not get the help I needed. And so fate just sort of handed me the task of developing this therapy in search for something that might help me. I wanted to know what was wrong with me. I didn't feel it was blame or shame. I wanted someone to tell me why I was the way I was. And it was a personality disorder.
Yeah.
So the other thing is we don't tell patients their personality. We don't tell them the diagnosis unless they ask for it.
Right. Okay.
It's their business to ask for it. So we're working with them, and our diagnoses too are, even though the DSM has the criteria, that's not what we're looking for. So we don't care if you meet 5 of 9 criteria. What we care is if you have a certain internal dynamic that is causing you harm, and that's your adjustment, right? So, for example, if you cling to external people to avoid a negative voice on the inside that beats you up, that is a borderline dynamic. And you, as a therapist, need to understand that dynamic, because the way you undo that dynamic is different than what a schizoid dynamic. A schizoid dynamic, the person stands close to another person with their body, but their emotions and their self are detached and floating out and above, away from the body and the person. It's a dissociative style of of defense. And so when we say schizoid, it's shorthand for that defensive process. When we say borderline, it's shorthand for the clinging defensive process. We're using those to describe dynamic things that are going on inside of you, not, oh, here's what's wrong with you, and there's nothing we're going to do about it.
Yeah. For clarification for the audience, and me too, just fine. So what falls under personality disorder in your practice, at least?
Okay, we have
yeah, go ahead.
borderline personality. Again, it may be the full disorder, it may not be, but if it's a defensive process, we're going to call it borderline personality, avoidant personality, schizoid personality, masochistic personality, narcissistic personality, paranoid personality.
Oh, there are a lot.
Obsessive compulsive personality.
Okay.
Histrionic personality, antisocial personality, schizotypal personality, passive aggressive personality, and dependent personality.
Wow. Okay.
That's quite a
Have they
list.
Yeah, I lied. I'm sorry. I didn't lie. I just didn't know it. One more question. Have there been studies done of people's brains, the cognitive function, and the actual brain makeup to correlate to the diagnosis? Sorry.
Not a lot, but there is one that I know of where the researcher took fMRI scans, which shows how much activity is happening in a certain place. And so, for example, if you've got someone who was addicted to
Other way.
there we go.
Is that the camera throwing you? The camera always
The
does that.
camera's throwing me up. Okay, there we go. There we go.
There
Okay.
you got it. You got it, Steve.
Okay. I'll go Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was one fellow who took fMRIs, which shows where the activity is. So, for example, if you take someone who's been addicted to cocaine,
Right.
and you take a shot of their brain, but they're no longer addicted, you'll see most of the activity is up here in the frontal lobes. Planning, assessing, paying attention. This is the part that makes us different from other animals, right? Is that big frontal lobe. And there won't be much activity down here in the right amygdala. That's the emotional brain. So the logical brain will be really active and the emotional brain won't, and the fMRI will show that. Then if you bring out a picture of cocaine, or more still, a bag of cocaine, all of a sudden all this activity shifts and now they're down here. And you can see that has come very alive. And if you've ever had trouble with addiction, which I have had, you know the difference when you're thinking clearly and then all of a sudden that drug comes in front of you and bam, you're not thinking anymore, right? So when this fellow did research, he could show that borderline people lived primarily right here in their emotions, and schizoid people lived up here in their rational brain. So you could see the two different parts of their brain that were primarily functioning when they were in their defensive mode.
Does that help you with treatment at all?
Yes, I use very simple brain analogies to teach therapists. So I will teach them the difference between the frontal lobe and the right limbic system, but that's about all we do. We don't get more complicated with the brain most of the time. There are reasons we might with obsessive compulsive or other things, but mostly it's just, are you rational? Are you emotional? Are you rational? Are you emotional?
Gotcha. All right, Dale, you're on. I totally manipulated that, or not.
No, you did a fantastic job and some great questions there.
I was trying
Great
to
questions.
like trauma people have complained and what kind of gets them stuck with, because to be honest with you, I dealt with the welfare population, and what I really did that helped them was not much of anything, but just be and accept it, and just I think for the first time they could see themselves. And when they saw themselves, and I would just share my out of the box experiences, right? Because I never knew, but I had a lot of neurodiversity. And so the way the normal world works, I couldn't work that way. So I had to find out of the box ways. And so a lot of people, though, got just automatically sent to mental health when I think really what they just needed was a little nurturing, a parent, a friend, or whatever. And I know from my own self, you overthink mental health sometimes. You can go down a rabbit hole.
Steve,
Do you know what I'm saying? I don't
Well, I
want to.
do, and I see that differently. And you see things in a way that the majority of people in mental health see things. Is it this or this? And we say, put them both together. How
Right.
about be really good at being and being connected and relational with this person and being really good at technique? So there is a mild controversy in therapy these days over whether it is relationship or technique that heals. That's crazy. It's like
You
saying,
think I agree with you. It is
it's
both.
like saying, is a banana split ice cream or whipped cream?
In your experience with colleagues, though, in all honesty, have you found a lot of people who can do both?
Well,
Or are you doing
no.
the cream of the crop? Yeah, I was going to say that's I think what I've seen as a healthcare. So many people that go into our profession do so because their own pain, which is all well and good, but you got to see your own pain first before you try to guide others through theirs. And I think that's what happens a lot is that the people who are quote unquote helping other people, they haven't dealt with their own stuff. So it's really hard to be authentic and open to someone else's pain if it's going to trigger your own. And that's what I saw a lot. Now, I dealt with the system, right? So it's a whole different ballgame. I dealt with DHS and clinics and everything. But, yeah, so you are right. I am a professional, but I also spent many years around trauma and have my own. So I can see both sides. And you're right, it takes both. But the foundation is the human aspect, I think. The foundation. Like you can do all the technique in the world, but if someone doesn't feel seen or nurtured or accepted for who they are, or if they can't even see themselves, then you're kind of like hitting your head against the wall. You know what I mean? It's putting a Band-Aid on it, I think.
Well, again, to complicate it a little bit, and that is,
I didn't do that complicated there. That's good.
no, I'm going to complicate it. That is, that relationship building can be done with techniques. So if some people say it's the relationship, some people say it's technique, we say it is the integration of these two things. So when we are being relational, we are also being highly technical. So for example, if I'm meeting with someone who is borderline, and for the early in our therapy, and I'm starting to make a relationship with them, I want to be attentive, I want to be warm and kind, I want to be those things, and I want to be technical too. So what I will do is because we've integrated solution focus into what we do a lot, I will use moments like that to give compliments, because compliments are a big part of solution focused therapy. So the person is talking and they're going, oh my God, I'm just a mess. I've just been drunk for like 5 days and nonstop, and I'm fighting with my boyfriend all the time. It's just horrible. And I've been cutting. Look at that. I've been cutting. It's been just horrible. And I'll say, oh God, I'm so sorry. This is brutal what you're going through. This is absolutely brutal. I really hate it that you're going through this much. I really want to help you because I hate it that you feel this badly. But you don't seem drunk now. Well, no, I drank for 5 days, but I wanted to come here sober. Wow, I'm impressed. You came here sober? How did you do that? And so I will be empathetic and forming relationship around their exception, which speeds up not only the relationship building, but the technical part, which is the building of esteem through the compliment.
And you do exactly the one thing I realized I did, which I haven't found on myself, being a patient and being someone who's stepped way out of my comfort zone. And so there are times Dale and I talk about it. I would call a friend, someone say, listen, can you just hold a space for me? Don't worry about the mindset. I know what I have to do, but right now I just need to be that 5-year-old who's scared. Can you just hold a space so I can get the words out of my head? And nobody could validate. I didn't come across only one person who could hold a space. And that was Dale, by the way, hold a space and just go, wow, that really sucks what you're going through. But that's a huge difference that I found that I, like you, used to do with patients. I would always validate what they felt they were going through. And in society, I think we try to go like, no, it'll be all right. Well, why don't you do this? But I think we're missing a piece of validating the crappiness of what is. And if you don't validate what is, just for yourself, so you can get rid of the emotion, right? Then it's very hard, I think, to shift your mindset into what can be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge piece that's missing is we don't, and to say to someone, God, that sucks. Like, I'm so sorry you're experiencing that. What if you could see it this way, and kind of just, but you, at least for me in my 30 years experience, that's what I've seen. And for me personally, if someone validated for me what the real reality I was going through with a newly diagnosed traumatic brain injury, I wouldn't have had to I was fighting for it because it was an everyday. I was facing it every day and I couldn't find the answer. So when no one validated it, I just kept talking about it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that happens to Dale. Did you ever have that happen to you where something was serious? There was a real issue that you had to figure out how to move through.
Yes, and I've had some really bad experiences in that, where I had one therapist whose answer to every solution, every problem, no matter what it was go to AA, go to a meeting, no matter what the problem was.
Yeah.
There are some problems that just don't fit in with AA.
Yeah.
So I've had that where they didn't validate me at all. They
Yeah.
just said, go to a meeting, and that was the whole solution. That was before I met Dr. Diggs. In fact, it was a therapist before I met Dr. Diggs.
Mhm.
I think I talked to you about her in the beginning. Dr. Diggs was my therapist for years. 5 years, I think we had there in California before I moved home. What I was wondering, though, Dr. Diggs, is what brought you into therapy other than searching for your own answers, for your own issues? What brought you into being a therapist yourself?
Well, it's the only thing I was ever good at. Let's start there. I mean, when the first time I went to therapy, I was I was at the tail end of a drug addiction, and I was so severely depressed. My dear friend got me an appointment with a therapist, and I went in, and I couldn't speak. I was kind of mute. I was so depressed, and he would say, Steve, I'd like to help you, but I need you to talk to me. What's going on with you? And I remember looking at him, just going, just groaning, I was so beaten. I was so beaten. And then, and back in those days, that was in '76. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And back in those days, there was a lot of group therapy going on. So he did group therapy. So about 6 months later, new people would come into the group, and the way I was in the group, they'd think I was one of the therapists. Because I had a talent there,
Yeah.
And so it didn't take long for my therapist, Lewis, to kind of say, you probably ought to think about becoming a therapist. And at the time I was bent on being a musician, which I'm not that talented at. And so I started going to school, and I liked it a lot, but every time I went back in to get more therapy myself, it didn't work. And I was suffering so deeply from this personality disorder I had, and nothing would work. I'd go in, I could see the depth of the suffering of the patients I had, and I didn't have enough to work with them. And I said, this just doesn't work. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. So I quit twice doing therapy. And then this is the third time I came back. And basically I had, a spiritual experience, a real sense of spirit telling me that, this is what you're supposed to do. And I thought, all right, but I'm going to do it my way, because this way doesn't work. And if they don't like my way, then they can kick me out, and I don't care. I'll go do something else. I'll go be a musician. And I just started going in willing to invent. And I had one rule: you can't do something you know will not work. You cannot do it, Steve. And so I'd sit there and I'd say, gosh, I'm kind of lost at what to say to you. If I was to say the perfect thing to you, what would it be? Well, how about la da 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 da? And I'd say, okay, let's try it. La da 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 da. They'd go, yeah, I think that kind of worked. I'd say, okay, let's try that. And we'd walk down that road. It was just wide open. And I was so tired of cognitive behavioral people saying that psychoanalytic people were bad, and psychoanalytic people saying that strategic people were bad, and humanistic people saying that, yeah, everyone else is okay, but there was just this competition that I thought was, we're representing mental health? Give me a break, we're acting like little babies.
Steve, I've told Dale the last 5 years, I've been on the patient end just because it's chronic stress I end up with Hashimoto's encephalitis, my nervous system, it's just been a mess. But I walk out doctor's offices going, no, Spirit is showing me the worst of the worst, because I can't believe it's that bad all over, right? But it is. I'm going, we're the ones helping. How do you tell the people who are quote unquote helping that you're the problem? A lot of it, I don't want to blame all of it, but the judgment that I've received, because I know who I am, I know who I'm not, I stand in my truth, and my truth for someone who doesn't see theirs makes people uncomfortable. Like for people who are willing to see their truth, my truth is inspiring. But I've been so frustrated the last 5 years. I have a whole new empathy for people who aren't in the healthcare industry and have to rely
I got into the field. I actually made a mistake when I got into the field. I came into the field 2 years sober, barely starting to scratch the surface of my own work, and I ended up twice in a mental hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It just drove me absolutely nuts. So I got into it too. You mentioned that you got to do your work first. Well, you do. And I think you can't do your work through your clients.
Well, here's the thing. You can also, I think, do your work at this. So what I realized, Steve, real quick, my story was that when I was 16, I had a lot of trauma, and that started at age 2. But I didn't remember any of it. I had spiritually dissociated, which God loved dissociation in childhood, right? Because it allowed me to go in and be introspective and not take things personally. But when I went out at the age of 16, all of a sudden I tried to be like other people in high school. And then I didn't feel connected to myself. And then I felt really lost. I was okay not connected to anyone else as long as I felt aligned with me. But so I would go up to strangers and say, hey, my name's Leslie. I kind of struggle with this. What about you? And people would open up, and I would maintain eye contact. And I know the science now. I got into heart-brain universal coherence. And so I healed without even knowing I need to heal. Right? And so where I was going with that is, Dale, is I don't think we have to totally be done and healed if anyone ever is 100% healed. But I think we have to have an open heart.
Yes.
You can't be hiding from yourself, because then you're hiding your pain, and any energy that's coming in is going right under that armor, if you imagine an armor, right? But if your heart is open, then I think I've done a lot of work with energy. The energy just kind of circulates through the open heart chakra. And so for me, I hadn't done all my work people helped me heal, because as I would, like you, ask them questions. Well, what works for you? What would you like? It was the curiosity, the maintaining like the childlike and not being all stuffy and boundary. It was everything we weren't taught in school. When at Drexel University in Philly, one asked me, what did you do with patients? Because you have to teach other nurses. Your clients have 30% better life outcome. And I went, everything opposite you told me to in nursing school, as far as communication. I went in as a woman, not as a nurse, who had information that could help them, but they had information they could teach me. And together, and that's what it was. We were like partners in it. I wasn't up here. They weren't down here. We were here, equals, and so I think you don't have to be healed. You just have to be willing to see, acknowledge, connect, and embrace your own pain. And then I think our role here as humans is to hold a space to heal one another, not, just through the energy of love, which is so anyhow.
I understand what you're saying very well. And what I was saying, though, is I hadn't even started. I haven't seen anything except doing 7, 8, 12-step meetings a week, which was not helping me. As I got 5 years sober, I stopped doing AA and did strictly therapy. And that's what helped me. That's what got me to where I could accept the stuff the therapists were telling me and believe them and start to heal.
Mm.
And I've had the benefit of some incredible therapists over the years, and including Dr. Diggs. He has just been a life. He literally saved my life.
Yeah.
But literally.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
What, if you remember back, what were you feeling? What was it that caused you, if it wasn't a DNA thing, to abuse substances? Like, was it feeling within? Was it partially genetic, you think? Or, I'm wondering, neurodiversity, you're creatives, and because I, from what I saw from when I worked in welfare, that was a lot of it. It was the neurotypical brain didn't know that feeling of being super creative, but maybe being surrounded by people who aren't. And so your thinking is just all different, and labeled is not, quote unquote, normal.
Yeah, well, for me, what I was using alcohol for when I got older to understand it is to hide. Hide my emotions, hide my feelings, hide my pain, so I didn't have to share it with anybody. Also, that it was a way of surviving for me to survive. It's just part of the techniques I use. Stephen and I have talked many times about what I did to survive. Because I had to. It's the only way I could.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And alcohol was a part of that survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Is that same for you, Steve?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was raised in a relatively strict environment. All my family was alcoholic, but they were really strict with me, and so I had never really. I tasted a little alcohol, never had drugs or any of that until I went to college, and then I got to college, and the first week I was there, there was this. The Vietnam vets were bringing drugs back from Vietnam when they get out, and there was cannabis hash mixed with opium, and that's the first time I got loaded. And that's really strong. And of course I tolerated it because it is genetic with me. But I remember I went to bed that night and I realized it was the first time in my life I could ever remember not being anxious.
Mm.
That high made me not anxious. And I was relaxed and confident. And I lay down on my bed and I said, people have been asking me my whole life what I'm going to be when I grow up. And now I know I'm going to be a drug addict.
Oh, jeez.
Yes. The first time I got loaded, it was on. I knew it because even to have a couple of hours free from anxiety meant so much to me.
Do you recall what was it? Family what sparked your anxiety? Are you
Just a huge amounts of adverse childhood experience. I've got a lot of trauma. A lot of trauma. I mean, I'm 6 or something like that. I'm way up there
Yeah, me too.
on
7.
ACEs. Yeah.
All
So
three of us. All
yeah.
three
So
of us been through the ringer more than
Well,
once.
I mean, I don't want to go into this now, but I truly, I live my life so differently that as a nurse and going through school, I would go, is this healthy or am I not? Like, because the way I lived, just so open, you could throw a bunch of labels in it. And so I did a lot, and I'm like, no, I don't enable because I don't want people to need me. They don't even know my name. I do this. So, yeah, I don't try to control it, right? But it ended up in the last couple of years in starting writing to my younger self. When I found out I had traumatic brain injury, I'm like, you're amazing. How'd you get through life with like all this stuff? And I found out I had 3 near-death experiences. First age 2, then one at 18, then one at 42. And I went, oh yeah, now it all makes sense, right? Because in the street, people would be like, wow, that gift, you sound like Jesus. I'm like, no, never went to church, never did the Bible thing, no. And I think the reason I'm telling you this is I'm really thinking there's a neurodivinity to trauma, that our brains are changed in a way for quote unquote neurodiversity so that we can hold a space and use our pain to be empathetic and honest and to kind of bridge the gap between neurotypical. And I think what happens is no one's there to teach us. Like, I listened to a voiceless voice since I was 2. It taught me all these heart healings. They allowed me to not take things personal. And, that's why I just look and I'm like, oh man, like people in trauma, there's creatives, homeless people. Like I've met so many brilliant, talented people there on the street.
Yeah.
Because they can't figure out how to merge into society. And that's got to change because like the world needs both. The world needs neurotypical and they need neurodiverse. If it was neurotypical, nothing new would ever be done. But if it's all neurodiverse, we'd have a million brilliant ideas, but nothing would ever be completed. So like we need to, I call it neurofusion. It's like bring them together, learn how to work with one another. And I was just, where I was going with my question is I wonder if it is that neurodiverse brain. In Philly, where I worked, when we took arts out of the schools, I tried to say to someone, can we do studies? Like, because when about 7 years after they took arts out of the schools, drugs were at the highest. And I'm like, there's no outlet for creative expression. An artist without an outlet for expression is mental health waiting to happen. And I know that because it's almost happened to me the past 5 years as I've been trying to work on this and very linear when my brain is anything but linear. And I haven't been self-expressing and it's all just bottled up inside, So I don't know the answer to all that, but you have any ideas how we can work with that, Steve or Dale?
Well, I guess what I would say, my experience is that trauma damages the childhood personality. Trauma damages that. Now, some people who are really creative, it does seem to facilitate that opening of creativity. And to me, I think it does have a direct connection there. We've got a patient in our clinic right now who is DID, and his art is just stunning, and he suffers so much. And Tashan is working with him, and he's starting to get better. So it's very hopeful and helpful that happens. But it's there. But then also, I know people who weren't so creative temperamentally, or maybe weren't so neurodivergent, and the trauma damages their personality, and they don't find much benefit from it. There's not much that comes out of it. Some people are real heart people, and it just makes them so convicted in their heart that they want to take care of themselves and their friends and children, that kind of thing. So to me, it does depend probably on the brain. I think you're right. I think it does depend on the
Well,
brain of the
it's
person who
funny.
got hurt.
I didn't know it then, but over the past couple of years in writing, I'm like, okay, what did I do? How did I do this? Because the answer in life work, I was like, I love people into being. That was it. They're like, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know. I live my life in a state of being, just looking for joy in the moment, giving others what I need, and just seeing a piece of me in everyone I see. And that put me in a state of flow so that, like, I have 2 college degrees, and now from what I know, my reading comprehension is a first grade level. How'd I do that? I just kind of listened. I had a flow, but looking back, I remember now putting my hand on my heart at the age of 2, my hand on my heart, breathing from like I call it rubber band breathing. I would take in the breath from the ground, breathe it up to my head, holding my abs in, and then blow it out, or not blow it out, breathe it back down, still holding my abs in. And at the same time I was doing this, I'd go, I am safe. The world's a loving, accepting place. And I would vision. And I'm like, son of a gun, I was visioning and doing affirmations and breathing in 1964. No one taught me to do it except for that voiceless voice.
Mm-hmm.
But what that did was allowed me to like ground within myself every day. I could connect with myself, So I do that with strangers now. I just go up to because I can kind of sense who's really struggling. I just go put my hand on their heart, put theirs on mine, say, look in my eyes. And people who are hiding burst out in tears, and people who aren't just go. I had a dentist yesterday I was doing with her, and she goes, what was that? And I go, you tell me, what was that? And she goes, immediate peace and calm. I said, we're just connected and coherent. That's it. No words. That's it. And I think I was given all these very simple things just so people can experience what it feels like just to come out from beneath the armor. I think the key was whatever I was told, that thing allowed me when I was sexually abused, starting to go like, and now this came out in writing, child's handwriting. It really freaked me out. But I was like, well, I know this isn't about me. Why are they hurting? And this is what I did all through why are they hurting? What would I need if I was them? Okay, how can I give them that was still me not hurting anymore, right? So I was not codependent, a little bit in my family, but as soon as I went out in the world, no signs of codependency, none whatsoever. But it was, do you think that's the missing piece, that people, whether creative or not, if they could look at the experience as just an experience, that means nothing about them, who they are. Do you think that would...
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, you could very well be right. That's not a world that I've lived in at all. So, yeah, you could be very right, but I don't know.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Dr. Diggs. I've been wanting to ask you this question since I first found out about it. Is your dissertation that you wrote, that small little book, the one with 500 pages?
Yeah.
For your most people don't write 500-page dissertations, I don't think. It weighs about 50 pounds. You've shown it to me. What brought you into doing? Because what it is, Leslie, is he did his dissertation on pedophilia.
Yeah, the dissertation is on it's a theory of human incest avoidance, and it says basically that at the time, and for about 100 years, there's been this debate about whether incest avoidance is a cultural creation or an instinct. And so, the way I do things is I assume it's both of those things. I always assume it's both, because people, whenever there's a either or, I think, no, it's a both and. And so I set about to make a both and theory out of this. And what I discovered are two different strands of incest avoidance. One I called the maternal inhibition, and the other is the paternal prohibition. So women have an instinctual genetic inhibition to sexually abusing their children. It just isn't in them. It isn't in who they are. And we can track this back to many animals. Many animals, the mother would never be sexual with her offspring. So if you take a chimpanzee troop, that the mother knows her children and would never be sexual with them. It's not going to happen, right? Now we take the paternal side. The fathers, the paternal side of things, don't have this instinctual inhibition. What they have is, in humans, a prohibition. How do we know this? Because again, if we take a chimpanzee troop, the chimpanzee males it's called horde mating, they all mate with the female. And so no one knows who the father is.
Right.
And so a female has a baby chimp, and that baby chimp is a female. She grows up to be a female. She reaches the time of breeding, and guess what? Her father has sex with her. Why? Because no one knows who the father is. Now, if we take human history and we look at anthropology, we find that there is this tribe called the Trobrianders, which were studied back in the 1920s, and it turns out they didn't know sex leads to pregnancy. They thought sex was just this bonding thing that happened between a man and a woman. And so from that we say, oh, humans, most of the time that humans have existed, we haven't understood that sex leads to pregnancy. Therefore, a man has no natural inhibition to having sex with his daughters because he doesn't even know that happened.
Yeah.
But when we have a human culture show up and people start recognizing that sex leads to pregnancy, then humans said, oh, so the same relation that mother has to her children, this guy has that same relationship to these children too. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We'll have to make sure women only have sex with the people we say they should have sex with. And that's when these clan-based control of female sexuality set in. This is my theory. I think it's still solid. It set in to really, really manage not the women's sexuality, but the father's lack of an inhibition to have sex with his daughter. That's why it was invented.
Mm.
Now,
No, go ahead.
Now for pedophilia, what we have is a different condition, and that is if you look at the lack of an inhibition to be sexual with one's own children, that also tends to transfer into other people's children. So the thing that really works, and it's very cool, is that the paternal prohibition, a law that says you can't have sex with your daughters and we're going to control your daughter to make sure she doesn't have any access to you, and we're going to make sure that never happens. With that prohibition doesn't work because rates of father-daughter incest are, of course, tragically and shockingly high, right? It's very high. So what we do is we put the maternal inhibition into the father. We ask him to recognize his love and care for his children. We ask him to recognize the tenderness and the empathy that he has for his children. In essence, we put him in a maternal psychological position, and this is a gender uncertainty, a gender flexible thing, into a maternal psychological position, so that it's now that he won't have sex with his daughters, it's that he couldn't have sex with his daughters because he has so much love and bonding and maternal instinct for those children. Now, if that particular awakening is inhibited in a person due to severe trauma, then they can end up with pedophilia. And in pedophilia, the love they feel is sexualized because they don't have enough of the maternal, non-sexual love that wouldn't have sex with the child. Instead, they have an immature sexuality without that love, and that ends up being interested in the children. But the answer to pedophilia is the same as the answer to stopping fathers from having incest. It's the taking in of the maternal position psychologically becoming a mother. Now, why this is ultimately important is that's the position we sit in most of the time when we're doing therapy, the maternal position. And so I sit in that position in order to care for women who have had very severe sexual abuse, and they feel safe with me. Why? Because I'm actually in the mother position and they don't perceive me as a man. And many of them have said that they don't perceive me. So the answer to deep therapy with women who have been abused is be a mother. The answer to pedophilia is be a mother. The answer to father-daughter incest is be a mother. It's all the same, awakening the deep caring instincts within you to take care of this child.
I have a question, 2 questions. The first is kind of easy. Have there ever been studies on men who are pedophiliacs, whatever,
Yeah.
who have sex with kids, on the amount breast versus bottle fed?
I don't know about that. It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
'Cause when you were saying something about the maternal and how women have the maternal, I'm wondering if, back in the days when there was no formula or bottles and everyone breastfed, does that connection, that deep, intimate connection that's non-sexual?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good idea, but has been plenty of
Yeah.
childhood sex abuse,
just-
incest within families where breastfeeding happened. I mean, yeah.
And then my other question is for men or women who do sexually abuse their children, do they go outside the family, or does a pedophile, one that sexually abuses other people's children, do they generally have children? Do they sexually abuse their own children, or is there a pedophile that stays within the incestual family versus one that stays away from the incestual family and goes outside?
Yes. Yeah, both of those are real.
Okay.
Both of them. Okay. I hate to be saying this, but we're running short on minute 2. This has been an incredible show. Dr. Diggs, you've done your usual beautiful job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Russell, you really brought some things out that I was curious about and I was wondering about, and I've learned from. I think you've done it. You've done good. You've done good, kid.
Thanks. I there were just questions, as I said, who really knows the answer, but I think, I think it's spiritual. It's got to lean more towards the spiritual aspect.
I agree, and I know that Dr. Diggs, Stephen here, is very devoted Christian. I know that. We've talked about it on numerous accounts during our sessions and before, and so we both believe, or at least I'm not going to speak for Dr. Diggs, I'm going to let him speak for himself, but I have a deep abiding love for God and Jesus. And that has helped me considerably get through this.
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
And this is, I just don't know because I don't do a lot of research, but Steve, did mental health come about hundreds and hundreds of years ago when they couldn't explain people's behavior that very well could have been spiritual? Witches, like people who were probably clairvoyant, whatever. Did mental health come to explain people's behavior that wasn't understood from a potential spiritual basis?
Well, I think what is accepted in psychology is that mental health is the scientific and it's the application of science and medical principles to the question of mental functioning. So
it doesn't matter if it's spiritually based or not.
Well, it does, because science and medicine disavows spirit almost completely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to the
Right.
doctor, it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, I found that myself too, because the last 7 years for me has been incredibly spiritual. I mean, I just roll everything from that voice I hear within. The least I can think, the better, because because of the way my brain trauma, when I think, it's a mess because my brain goes way outside the box, right? So I try to just listen to my gut, but through the years, I've wanted to talk to a therapist, but I've tried a couple of times and it's like I'm going, oh, I can't even tell them this stuff because they're going to think I'm psychotic. And I'm not. I'm just extremely spiritual. And I believe there's a higher calling, and there's, but a therapist who isn't spiritually based, yeah, would not be at help.
Right. Well, I do have patients who typically have early childhood sex abuse and do have psychic ability, clairvoyance or their empaths or that kind of stuff. And so I think that most of the time they have little or no control over the exercise of that ability because it developed out of trauma.
Yeah.
So if they want to keep that ability, I am fine with that. I don't mind that at all. But I do want to take away the trauma so that they can have control over the exercise of that ability.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
I may just be calling you because
I'll give Leslie your number, Steve.
There you go. Give her my number. That's good.
Instead of taxing friends like Dale, I'm like, I need someone to talk to, just like to, you know what I mean? Just
Yes.
Well, You're welcome to talk to me anytime because I get a lot out of it myself.
I know.
Anyway, I hate to say this, we got 3 minutes left. Is there any last words you want to say, Dr. Diggs?
I just want to say that, again, you are a treasure to me, and I am so glad to see you doing well, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm so glad to be part of this enterprise of yours. I'm glad I got to join.
Yeah, we may have you back later on as soon as we get more stuff going on. But anyway, thank you for appearing here, Stephen. Leslie, you've done an
Real
excellent
quick,
job.
Steve, where can people, are you accepting new patients? If people want to reach out to you, where can they, is there a link you can give Dale to?
Well, Nisotherapy.com, Nisotherapy Inc. If you put that in your browser, you will find us. And there's ways it'll give you directions for coming in as a patient. And I'm not accepting new patients. I'm on the way towards retirement. Plus, I have a lot of writing to do because all these ideas are in my head and I need to get them out and write them.
Oh, I know what that's like.
Yeah, exactly. So,
It's a loss that you're not accepting new patients. But I know
we have therapists who are accepting patients. There are six therapists we have that are. What's that?
I know his several of his staff members. I know Deshaun being one of them. He's been with him for a long, long time.
Yes.
So
and they're very competent. Yeah, they're good at the therapy.
Very good. Anyway, we got to go.
Thank you so
very much.
Yes.
Thank you. It was
my pleasure. Okay. Take.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Where is?
Okay, don't take off. All right, you can. Anyway, Leslie, thank you. It's a great show.
We're not recording now, right?
Just 1 second, we will be.